What's up, everybody? Scott Shetler here at Extreme Performance Training Systems, and welcome to this week's episode of Strength and Health TV. This week I want to talk a little bit about a video that we did here recently where I interviewed one of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes that trains with me, Chris Jones. If you've seen that interview, I've had some people contact me regarding some of the specifics around the training that we do with Chris, as well as some of the other combative athletes that we've worked with. And so I just want to talk a little bit about my ideas behind training those athletes and kind of why we do what we do. Now, with all the athletes that train here, and actually everybody that trains here, we all follow the conjugate sequence system. So there's no real prescribed program that anyone is following. Basically, what I believe in is I don't believe in programming at all. I don't like to have anything really written down. I do have a bit of a roadmap, kind of where we're going based on the individual, what sport they're competing in, what their needs are for optimal performance in that sport, and then we evaluate where they currently are and what they need to do to make improvements in the direction that they need to for optimal performance in their sport. So with that being said, what we do is on a weekly basis, we apply all the principles of training. We work maximal or near maximal weights. We do fast work, high velocity work, where we incorporate a lot of jumps, throws, and then the use of submaximal weights, usually with accommodating resistance, moving that weight very rapidly. We do a lot of, if the athlete needs some hypertrophy, we do a lot of repetition work, some high rep, high volume work, and then we also pay special attention to weak points, and then we have some different conditioning things that we try to address, again, within regard to the sport and where the athlete currently ranks in their level of physical development. So going back to the work that we do with Chris and then some of the other combative athletes that we've worked with, and I've worked with everybody from wrestlers, from the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes that we currently got in here, to mixed martial artists. And even though those were all combative sports, they do have certain individual requirements that we need to focus on a little bit. But the one big mistake that I see a lot of people make, and the one thing that we do not do, is we don't really bring the sport into the weight room, so to speak. There's really no sport specific. We don't try to take a sport movement pattern and overload it to any great degree, but we do look at how the body moves as far as basic actions, for instance, hip extension, how the shoulders operate, and then we try to take very general exercises and we try to strengthen those specific movements. We try to strengthen those specific joint functions, and then we also look at any potential for imbalances that need to be addressed, and so on and so forth. So again, it does get very individualized based on the athlete. Now, even though I've got powerlifters that follow a conjugate sequence method or a plan, I've got fighters that follow the conjugate sequence plan. None of their programs look the same, and this is where I kind of go back to the idea that the best program is no program, and that's why I hate having something written down. I hate having specific numbers that you have to go into the gym and hit, because it doesn't take into account daily readiness. So that's why I think what we do works pretty optimally for everybody, and it is working because I see continued progress with everybody that's training here. So with Chris, basically the way we structure it, and in his video he talked about his weekly training as far as his jiu-jitsu, then coming into the gym, and then the extra cardiac development and conditioning work and things like that we do. He's basically doing something every day. He spends, with combative athletes, particularly with mixed martial artists, they spend a lot of time training. They've got a lot of mat time, they've got a lot of ring time, they've got a lot of skills work and things like that. So I've got to take all that stuff into consideration when I'm looking at what we're going to do on a weekly basis. And with him, it's really not a huge amount of extra work that we do. When we talk about strength training and conditioning for these athletes, it's strictly general physical preparation. So we've got 2 in the gym days that we do. We've got 1 body weight that he does additionally on his own, and then he's got anywhere from 2 to 4 extra, for lack of a better term, cardio or conditioning workouts that he does, and we'll talk a little bit about those specifically here in a second. So if we look at his training week, he's basically in the gym doing something, whether he's teaching or whether he's going through a private session or whether he's rolling or doing skill work or whatnot in the gym almost daily. So in addition to that, he'll come in for 2 strength training sessions here at the gym, usually on Fridays and Sundays. On Fridays, we tend to focus on heavier work, higher weights. We work near maximal or sometimes maximal efforts. Typically what we'll do is we'll have kind of a primary exercise for the day, and it's usually some sort of bending or lower body focus type of movement, although the way that we do them, it's really a total body effort. But we like to do, for the max effort lifts, we like to do a lot of good morning type exercises. We like to do a lot of Zercher lifts, whether it's a Zercher squat or more of a Zercher lift with a hip extension. Zercher is where you're holding a bar in the crook of your elbows. We really like that because it works his lower back and it helps build up his hips. So we work a lot of good mornings, we work a lot of Zerchers, we work a lot of kind of a scissor stance, kind of a good morning lunge combination that we'll typically do. We use the safety bar, the safety squat bar a lot. I don't like to use a regular straight bar on his back because he does have a bit of a shoulder issue, that his range of motion is very limited in his left shoulder, which is something that we're trying to address. And just loading that with a barbell on the back, a straight bar on the back, is just a bad idea. So we like the safety bar because the yoke goes around the neck and shoulders. It's very, very good on the shoulders and it works his back like crazy because there's a camber on the bar, so the bar's pulling you forward all the time. So we do a lot of these good morning, these kind of scissor stance good morning lunge variations, different types of squatting exercises with the safety bar. So some of our favorites, we like to do deadlifts out of the rack, putting the bar on various pin heights, right below the knee, mid shin, and so forth, working different heights out of the rack. We like to do the good mornings. We'll typically do them with a safety squat bar. So he'll either do a regular good morning, usually up to about a 3 or a 5 rep effort. He'll do a good morning squat, is one that we've been working lately, where he'll drop down into a good morning with the safety bar on his back. He'll drop his hips down so that he's in the bottom part of a squat position, and then he'll stand up. So you're descending into a good morning, sitting back into a squat, then standing up like you would out of a squat, which has been really good for his lower back and building up his hips and his upper back as well. We do that scissor stance good morning lunge, where we'll put the bar on his back, the safety bar on his back, and he's got 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, so he's up on the ball of his foot on the back leg, and he descends into a good morning and then bends the knees a little bit, so it's a partial lunge coupled with a good morning, and he'll do those on both sides. We'll do Zercher lifts. We'll put the safety bar or a barbell in a power rack, and he'll hook his elbows under the bar and he'll stand up with it, either pulling from the pins. One of the things that we've done lately is we'll load up the safety squat bar, and he'll actually and we'll set it on the ground, and he'll actually fold forward at the hips, bend his knees a little bit enough to load the bar into his elbows, and then stand up with it all the way from the ground, which has been a huge lower back builder and torso builder as well. So those are just some of the examples of some of the maximal effort exercises that we do. I hate calling them max effort exercises because we're not always working up to a 1 rep max. Typically we're working a lot of 3 to 5 efforts. We are trying to build up some heavy strength endurance in the muscles of the lower back, the glutes, the hamstrings, the hips, and the torso. So those are just some of the things that we do on the maximal effort day or the near maximal effort exercises. We'll often work accommodating resistance into a lot of those exercises, where we'll suspend chains from the bar, or we'll attach bands to the bar to really help overload the top of the movement as he's locking out his hips, and that's been a huge factor for his improvement. Then after we do the main move, I need to back up, sorry about that. We always start with jumps. On his 2 days that he comes in, we always do about 40 reps in the jump, various jumps. We do box jumps, we do seated box jumps, we do weighted box jumps. We'll do box jumps where he starts out on the ground on his knees. He'll jump off his knees, land on his feet, then jump onto the box. So we work a lot of variety into the jumping, and everything from body weight. We'll load weights by putting a weight vest on them, ankle weights, holding dumbbells or kettlebells, or a combination of all those. So we use a lot of variety in the jumps. And we always start the workout out with about 40 reps of jumps. Then we go into the max effort or near max effort exercise that I just described. And then we move on usually to some sort of upper body exercises. For pressing, there's a handful of movements that will work. We don't do a ton of pressing, especially for maximal efforts. When we do the heavier stuff, he's usually working sets of 3 to 5. Sometimes we'll do a lot of repetition work for pressing with kettlebells or dumbbells. And then we always work some sort of pull in there as well. So typically for the pressing exercises, when we're going heavy, we'll do a floor press. I really like the floor press for these guys, taking the legs out of the movement. He's on his back and just pressing from the ground. When we use the barbell, we'll typically work up to heavy sets of 3 to 5, and I love to add chains to the bar so we get some accommodating resistance there, so he's got to continue to accelerate the load through the lockout. One of the things that we've been doing a lot of lately is, one of the things that we try to look at the concept of training economy, because I don't have him in here a lot. It's only a couple hours a week that I'm working with him. I can't do a zillion exercises. We've got to look at getting him in, getting him out, and using a lot of big bang for your buck sort of movements. So one of the things that I try to do is couple many abilities into one movement where possible. So one of the things that we've been playing with lately is on the floor presses, on his repetition floor presses, where you typically use kettlebells. So he's laying on his back and he's doing alternating floor presses, or he's doing the weights simultaneously. One of the things that we've been doing is having him do an isometric low cable pull in, or maybe a quasi isometric low cable pull in. So we'll get in front of a pulley and we'll attach the low pulley to his feet, and then he'll pull the weight back by pulling his knees toward his chest. And this gets him into a position that's similar to his guard, so he's working his torso isometrically to a huge degree while he's doing his presses. So we're getting a lot of work in that one movement. And again, it's not for the notion of sport specificity. It's just that we're trying to do, if I can work his torso while doing some pressing, I'm going to do that. And another variation that will work is doing kettlebell presses. Instead of having him stand up, I'll actually have him sit down with his legs out in front of him, usually a spread eagle type of sit, and he's got a pair of kettlebells racked at his chest. Then he leans back just slightly so that he's got some pressure on his abs, so that he's having to stabilize his torso, and then he does alternating presses with the kettlebell, and that's a fantastic torso builder while we're getting some pressing work as well. Again, focusing on that concept of training economy, we're able to get a lot of work done in that one movement, because typically we're only doing about 5 to 6 movements per workout, so I really got to make sure that we're hitting a lot of things, and that even rolls over into a lot of our pulling exercises. Typically 90% of the time we're going to be doing some sort of pull-up, and usually we're going to be using a gi pull-up. And the reason that we use a gi, which is the jacket that the jiu-jitsu guys wear, we'll hang that over a pull-up bar, and he'll just kind of work his fingers into the lapels of the gi, and he'll hang on to the gi doing his pull-ups. So not only are we getting back work, but we're also building up grip strength in a very specific way that he's going to use it. It's a very isometric grip strength, so he's not squeezing balls or squeezing grippers. He's clenching his fists, wrapping them around the gi, and hanging out, moving his body weight around the pull-up bar. So we're getting a lot of great grip and forearm work there, in addition to the lats and the upper back through the pull-up exercise. Sometimes we'll do some rows. We might do some inverted rows. One of the things that I like to do is, instead of doing a T-bar row, we do a gi bar row, where he'll actually, instead of having a T-bar attachment attached to the barbell and bending over and doing a bent row, we'll just loop the gi under the barbell, and he'll do the rows by pulling the barbell up with the gi. So that's another way that we can get some specific grip work while we're working the upper back and the lats. So typically that's what we move on to next. We usually do anywhere from 3 to 5 sets of the presses and the pulls. And then we like to hit the backside. We do a lot of hip work. We do a lot of lower back work. So we do a lot of glute hamstrings. We do some different types of deadlift movements. I might have him deadlift a pair of kettlebells or a barbell in our belt squat, wearing the belt squat, so that as he's deadlifting the weight, he's also got the load from the belt squat attached to his hips. So he's got to drive the hips extra hard to get that lockout. We do a lot of reverse hyperextensions for back strength and health. And then we're going to do a lot of torso work. And we're not just doing crunches. Typically what I'm going to have him do, I'm going to have him do the grappler bar twists. We might do a lot of med ball rotational drills. We like to do a lot of static and rotational drills for the torso. One of the movements that we've found a lot of success with is to get into a glute ham raise and go back and hold kind of an isometric position, like maybe halfway up in the sit-up, and attach mini bands to the base of the glute ham. And then he's going to do alternate band punches. So he's creating a high amount of force, a high degree of force as he's punching into these bands. And it's really working his abs and his entire torso in a good static position. So that's another one of our favorite torso movements as well. Coupled with the lower back through the reverse hyper. Then, like I said, we do a lot of glute hams, a lot of deadlift type exercises to help build up his hips, lower back, and entire torso. Then we usually wrap it up by getting into the belt squat, and he's always doing some sort of belt squat walking. We'll have band resistance on the belt squat, straight weight, bands and weight. He'll wear the belt and he'll walk for a period of time. Sometimes we do really high weights and we do short sets, maybe 30 to 60 seconds. Sometimes he'll do lower weights, and he's walked up to 7 minutes continuously in the belt squat. We'll also work other drills, again, keeping that training economy idea going here. We'll do some other movements while he's doing the belt squat. So he may be doing kettlebell deadlifts, he may be doing squats, coupled with some walking. We might have him hold some heavy med balls with his hips driven forward. We might throw med balls to him in different positions, so he's got to catch them over here and rotate, down here and throw, kind of underhand scoop throw, catch up high over his head, just so we're challenging him from a bunch of different angles and working the entire body. He may carry like a slosh log, a log that's half filled with water, so as he's walking, the water's sloshing around, bringing some extra static work to the torso. Might have him take a sandbag and do some cleans, some squats with a sandbag, some different things like that. So there's a lot of variety that we work in that belt squat. And again, sometimes we're going really, really heavy weight for lower repeated timed sets, usually 30 to 60 seconds. And then some of the times we're going with really lightweight and we're building up to really, really long duration, 5, 6, 7 minute sets. Which again is going to bring him into that energy system that he uses for his matches, because typically he's going to grapple for about that time. So we're putting a lot of stress on the body in a similar time frame that he's going to be working in competition, and that's going to help us condition specific energy systems. After that, we always finish up with some sort of sled dragging, some sort of sled pulling. Sometimes it's heavy weights for shorter distances, sometimes it's lighter, moderate weights for greater distances, but typically we finish up with anywhere from about 5 to 10 minutes or more of sled pulling. We might just do lower body dragging, having him wear a weight vest, maybe ankle weights, some wrist weights or something as he's pulling a sled attached to a weightlifting belt and just kind of walking for time. Sometimes we put the upper body strap attachment, and he'll walk and do presses, he'll turn around and walk and do rows, he'll walk sideways and do some wood chopper type movements for the torso. So again, training economy, we're building some strength while we're doing some conditioning work. On the other day that we train, the structure is very similar to what I just described, but instead of doing some sort of maximal effort lift, we're going to do a dynamic effort lift. So after he does his jumps, his 40 jumps, typically what we're doing is speed deadlifts. We're doing this off of a rack or out of a power rack with bands attached to the bar, or we're doing it from our deadlift platform that's got bands attached over the bar. So he is accommodating the resistance with the bands. He's typically pulling somewhere in the ballpark of 50% of his max in the deadlift in bar weight, and then the bands are going to add somewhere around 30%. So he's working about 80% of his max. He's usually doing about 20 reps, 20 to 25 reps, 7 sets of 3 is typically what we work in the speed deadlift. And then we move on to the pressing, the pulling, the backside work, the torso work, the lower back work, the belt squat, and the sled pulling. So those are his 2 main strength days. And then he's got an additional body weight day that he does where we do this body weight circuit. He usually just does the exercises for time. This is a series that I got from the book called Special Strengths for All Sports. It was written by Louis Simmons. One of the contributing authors, a jiu-jitsu teacher named John Saylor, who's written the book Vital Jiu-Jitsu, I think. He runs a jiu-jitsu school up in Ohio. I believe it's called Shingi Tai Jiu-Jitsu. He's got a bodyweight series they call a Shingi Tai 6-pack, and I just have Chris do that drill once a week. So typically he's going to start out with neck bridging and neck work. We usually do about a minute or 2 of that. And then he goes into Hindu squats, Hindu push-ups, pull-ups, glute ham raises, and sit-ups. And when we started out, I had him doing 3 circuits of that at about 30 seconds per movement, and he's built up to the point where he's doing about 45 to 60 seconds for 3 circuits. So that's just a bodyweight conditioning workout. Doesn't take a long time, but he'll do that early in the week. He trains here on Fridays and Sundays, so usually Tuesdays he's doing that workout. And then we do 2 to 4 cardio workouts a week. I say cardio loosely because we are targeting different goals with these cardio workouts, but one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing was building up his cardiovascular efficiency. We do cardiac output training where he's typically working 130 to 150 beats per minute for between 45 and 60 minutes per workout. Usually some sort of continuous movement type of training, maintaining that heart rate for the entire time. What that does is it improves his stroke volume, or basically his cardiovascular efficiency is a better way to look at it. Stroke volume is how much blood your heart's ejecting per beat, per stroke. And by doing this sort of training, you're making your entire cardiovascular system more efficient. That could be a whole video in and of itself. If you want a great guide to energy systems development, I'd recommend Joel Jamison's book, Ultimate MMA Conditioning, as well as all the articles he writes at his website, which is 8weeksout.com. He's done some fantastic work with combative athletes, and he's a wealth of information. Definitely recommend tapping into that. But that's where I got this special cardio work that we're doing. It's very boring, but it's very effective. The results that we've seen with it is a lower resting heart rate, a lower training heart rate, and a faster recovery heart rate. So seen huge improvements in cardiovascular efficiency across the board. We'll also work into some more intensive training where he'll do some power intervals where he goes all out, maintaining a maximal heart rate that he can maintain for 60 to 120 seconds, and then he'll go through a recovery period after that, getting his heart rate down to about 120 to 130 before he repeats those efforts. That could be a different cardio day. Some of the other things he's working is just continuous, where he's going kind of a maximal output. This is typically done on a Versa climber at his gym, where he sets the resistance really high, and he works as hard as he can for a period of time, usually about 10 to 20 minutes for a couple of reps per workout. So that's another type of cardio workout that we've implemented with great success. But the foundation of it is that cardiovascular efficiency work, that cardiac output training. So those are the cardiovascular day. Again, usually 2 to 4 of those per week, depending on where he's at in relation to a competition. And that's basically all the physical training he does. So it's really not a lot when you look at his overall weekly training volume. And this is exactly the same type of work that I would do for all the combative athletes in here. Again, we've got to look at there are some specificity issues that we do have to look at. One of the things I mentioned, Chris has a bad left shoulder. His range of motion is very bad. He can really only raise it up to about here. One of the things I've gotten doing is a lot of Indian club swinging with 1, 2, and sometimes 3-pound clubs to help some strength and range of motion through the shoulder. We're starting to see some really good improvement with that. We do a lot of external rotator work. We do a lot of various exercises for the rotator cuff, some stretching and mobility. I mean, there's so many other things that go into the physical training of these athletes. I'm just kind of scratching the surface with the overview for you here, but this is how a lot of the combative athletes would train. Again, we would look at, are they a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athlete? Are they a boxer? Are they a wrestler? Are they into mixed martial arts? What are they competing in? And then we're going to build up the muscle groups, the energy systems, and try to reinforce the movement patterns that they need for their specific competition. But again, training's got to be very general. We want to get them as strong as possible, producing as much power, rate of force development as possible, and we want to get them, fast, explosive, conditioned. We want to make sure that we're creating the highest level of physical condition with the athletes so that when they go practice the sport, when they get over to the specificity side of their training, their coach or their trainer has the most optimal physical specimen to work with. That's all that we can do. You can't make an athlete in the weight room. You can only make them stronger, faster, more explosive, more powerful, better conditioned. And then they've got to take those general qualities that we're improving in them and transfer them into their sport. So this is why the idea of taking a sport movement pattern and overloading it in the gym, it's just a little bit ridiculous. The real transfer happens during the specificity training, which is the actual skill practice for the sport that they're participating in. So it's really important that if you're working with athletes, that you spend a lot of time talking to them, finding out what they do, understanding the physical requirements of their sport, talking to their coaches, and working well with them, because you don't want to do something that's taking away from the specificity. You don't want to do something that's taken away from their specific skill development. What you're trying to do is keep them as injury-free as possible and enhance what happens on the specificity side. So that's the approach that we take with all the combative athletes here. That's just kind of a snapshot of what we do with Chris. There's a little bit of variety in everybody else's training, but that's a really good general overview of how we've taken this system and we've kind of tailored it to Chris's specific needs as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athlete with his strengths, his weaknesses, his injuries, and things like that. So hopefully that gives you a little bit better idea what we do with them. Again, I don't believe in quote-unquote programming. It's something I just kind of roll my eyes when I go, what program you following, what program you following. It might not be bad, but it's not optimal. As a coach, as a trainer, you've got to spend a lot of time learning what the specific methods of training are, the specific skills and such, you need to learn about the methods of training, and then you need to take those methods and apply them to the individuals you're working with. And this is where really good coaching happens. When you understand how to apply the principles of training, when you understand what things like the maximal effort method, the dynamic effort method, the sub-maximal effort method, the repeated effort method, just general principles, training principles, then you can take them and build the program or build the training of that individual athlete. And that's where really good things happen, because you're making this general training specifically suited to the needs of that athlete. And that's where a general program, I think, a lot of times is just bullshit, because it may be optimal for somebody, it may not be enough training stimulus, it may be too much of a training stimulus. So it's really tough to just take one general program and apply that to a bunch of different people, because everybody's got different levels of physical development, they've got different strengths, they've got different weaknesses, they've got different, if they got enough mileage, they're going to have injuries or some, bum issues that they're dealing with. So you've got to really take a general approach to training and then tailor that to the specific needs of your athlete. And when you can do that is when you start seeing really, really good results in the physical development of the athletes. And then you're giving the coach a much better physical specimen to work with. So again, that's just a little bit of an overview of how I work with the combative athletes here. But again, we take the conjugate sequence system where we're working on multiple qualities, multiple principles simultaneously on a weekly training basis. As far as competition goes, we just start about 3 weeks out, and then we start reducing the load going into the competition. It's a very surefire way to make sure that the athlete's totally prepared and peaked for the contest. So for instance, if Chris has a tournament or a match on a Saturday, we work back 3 weeks out. So we start 21 days out is his biggest, the most intense and the highest volume training session. 14 days out, we're at about 75%. 7 days out, we're at about 60%. His last heavy workout occurs about 10 days prior, about a week and a half prior to his competition. That's a very general overview of how we taper, how we peak at that 3 week mark, that 21 day mark, and then we just taper the volume down, which allows the process of delayed transformation or the supercompensation of the strength, power, speed that we've developed for that entire training period leading up to the competition. That taper is what allows that new strength development, the new power development to be realized so that he's at his best on a competition day. So it's the 3 week taper is a surefire way to prepare for a competition. We use the 3 week taper basically for all of our athletes whenever they have a competition. So that allows us to train. That's why we don't really waive much in the training prior to that. We train hard every week. We train maximal or near maximal. We train speed, rate of force development, absolute power, and then we do whatever repetition work we need to do if muscle hypertrophy or you're building strengths or weaknesses. We do that on a weekly basis, and we just micro adjust per the athlete, but we're hitting all those skills and qualities on a weekly basis. So we're training at 90% or better all the time. So when it comes time for a contest, all you got to do is work that 3 week taper in, and you're peaked and you're in optimal shape, ready to go. So it works out really, really well, and that, like I said, that's just an overview of what we're doing with the combative athletes here. Maybe in some future videos I'll talk about some of the things that we do with some of the other athletes, but that's a very good snapshot of how we build the training programs for all of our athletes. Again, it's very individualized, and we're following the conjugate sequence system. So hopefully you enjoyed this week's video, and hopefully for those of you who asked about Chris's training program, it gives you a little bit better idea of how it is that he trains. So thanks for asking. And if you've got any questions, comments, or suggestions for future show topics, leave those in the comment section below this video. And as always, stay strong and stay healthy.